6:30. I will call the regional school committee to order, and because we have a remote participant, we will take attendance by roll call. Irv?
Present.
Excellent. Bridget?
Yes, present.
Jennifer?
Present.
Anna?
Present.
William?
Present.
Deb?
Here.
Sarah?
Present.
Tillman?
Present.
And Sarah Bess. I am also here. Okay. So our first matter of business is to go for executive session. So I will now move the Amherst Pelham Regional School Committee will now consider entering executive session in accordance with Open Meeting Law, MGL-C 30A, Section 21A, to conduct collective bargaining sessions with AFSCME and to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigation position of the public body, and the chair so declares, and I declare, with the intent of returning to open session.
Second, Jennifer.
Excellent. So roll call vote. Irv?
Yes.
Bridget?
Yes.
Jennifer?
Yes.
Anna?
Yes.
William?
Yes.
Deb?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
Tillman?
Yes.
And Sarah Bess. So we are in executive session and we shall return. We'll meet you in the other link, Irv.
Are we sitting over there?
I think we're gonna go to the classroom.
Oh, okay.
And we have to actually.
Oh.
open session. Irv, are you back with us? Oh, and Shannon.
I'm back.
Okay. So next is our AFSCME contract. To run through quickly the updates that were made. Oh, I should have kept Jen, made her go through it. It will be attached to the agenda. There is some clarifying language about FMLA and sick bank. There was an increase in shift differential of 50 cents. There were some new grades added. And some increased longevity payments. And I will attach the rest of it. Was there anything else anybody felt like we should make sure
Well,
to?
the COLAs, the cost of living.
Oh, yes, COLAs
big
were FY '25, 2.5%, FY '26, 3, and FY '27, also 3. Anything else anyone wanted to make sure we mentioned?
Well,
Go ahead, Deb.
yeah, I just want to say that the creativity involved in adding lanes to recruit and retain specialists that we've been having trouble filling is particularly appreciated in this.
Absolutely, yes, and thank you so much to all of the team that worked on putting this together. Negotiations are hard and long, even when things go well. So thank you to everybody on all sides. Jennifer?
I also wanted to just publicly thank Rupert Roy Clark for the heroic effort of updating the actual contract document with several contract cycles worth of agreed upon changes so that there's now one clean master document. Thank you, Rupert.
Awesome. All right, so,
And
Go ahead.
I will move that the committee approves the 2024-27 AFSCME contract.
Second.
Sarah, all right. Any further discussion? Bridget, how do you vote?
Yes.
Jennifer?
Yes.
Anna?
Yes.
William?
Yes.
Deb?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
Tillman?
Yes.
Irv?
I just want to say that it's really difficult, and it really would have been appreciated if we, before we voted on this, had what the financial impact was going to be, what the number was going to be. We have no number, nothing. As if we're treating this as if, oh, well, we can find the money somewhere, but we don't know.
Er-
We're voting on it. And I would have appreciated that being put in as a part of this discussion. And it wasn't.
Okay.
And so for me to vote on something without full information is something that I cannot do.
So, are you, how do you vote?
I'm voting no because I don't have enough information.
You're voting no, okay. And Sarah Beth, I vote yes. So it passes 8-1-0. Thank you so much to everybody who worked on this. All right. Public comment. We did not receive any, nor did anybody come to visit us today, so. So, chair's update. I don't have anything that we're not going to talk about later. Are there any school committee announcements or subcommittee updates that anybody would like to share? Deb?
I thought you'd talk longer. Sorry.
I'm sorry.
I can say something first, okay?
All right, Sarah.
Not for a subcommittee, just as a member, I wanted to say I attended the cabaret, the high school, middle school cabaret at the Drake last week, and it was fantastic. So hats off to all the singers and instrumentalists and to the teaching staff. It was wonderful.
Thank you.
Okay.
Deb.
I attended the Anti-Defamation League workshop. And so I brought back resources. So a member of the community reached out saying this was available. And so it was interesting. There's a lot of resources online both regarding anti-Semitic instances, but just generally speaking, anti-bullying. There's professional development, there's sample curricula. So that was particularly interesting and sports-related anti-bullying, anti-bias work that they do. So I brought that back. There's a whole bunch of stuff at the Massachusetts level that I think makes sense to just bring up briefly.
Sure.
Senator Comerford sent an email saying that the Mass Senate, both the Senate President and the Minority Leader, are committed to, in this cycle, to examining and reforming K through 12 funding. So we have, and in fact, the Minority Leader said, in particular, many districts have enrollment declining but rising costs. So I think that should be encouraging. What the turnaround time is, of course, no relief can come too soon, but there does seem to be movement at the state level to really take a look at funding. Secondarily, the governor has committed $800 billion to infrastructure in terms of transportation and roads and sidewalks, which also takes some of the pressure off the towns for roads and sidewalks. So one of the things that was somewhat an issue when we requested that perhaps out of cycle appropriations for just roads and sidewalks was not the best or the only place that needed money, that should take some of the pressure off competition for funds once those funds are released. And that will happen as a supplement to this budget. It doesn't have to go through like a 2-year process. So I think that's pretty much it. Oh, the last part is at the Amherst town level, the CPA funds, the $800,000 of CPA funds have been approved by town council. So that money should be forthcoming for the track and field. Did I say that? No. For the track and field. I would say that I would encourage our superintendent in discussions around facilities to clarify in writing maintenance and decision-making around this new facility, because the clarity that I think we get from town council regarding assessments does not seem to extend to facilities. So there seems to be a need to make that really clear to them that, yes, it's their money, but the track belongs to the region.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any further school committee? Jennifer?
So the Fiscal Sustainability Subcommittee met last week, and we discussed a response to the letter we received from the Amherst Town Council. We were going to present a draft letter to this committee tonight, and there is an agenda item about that, but we're going to ask to push that to our next meeting, and the three of us are going to meet next week, the three of us on the committee, to further refine the letter so that we can present something for this big, the whole committee to vote on. Thank you.
Great.
I'm sorry, I did have one more thing. So Jesus Leyva, who's one of the members of Mass Promise to Invest, and sort of the origin of both not the referendum. The petition, but I always get them confused. Referendum. Resolution that we signed. They believe they have sponsors for the charter school part of their petition. So that looks like it will be going forward, and they will be starting an outreach phase. Thank you.
Excellent. All right. I do not have anything further. Oh, excellent. All right. I do not have any minutes for us. I am working on getting them all sorted from last year, but I do think we need to start rotating who takes all the minutes, because it is too much to run the meeting and take all the minutes. So we need to figure that out. Okay. So
When? And starting now? Did we, like,
Well, so later in the meeting, we have on the docket an annual agenda and operating protocols. So I thought maybe we could fold it in to that discussion there. So we have some warrants on here. William, do you want to just address how they're being?
So it's still a work in progress, but one of the things we needed to do to be in compliance was to post all of the warrants. So this is all the warrants posted from July till December for payroll and then also for the region. So it's been batched, and now it'll be, every time we have a meeting, we'll post new ones.
Perfect. All right. Superintendent.
And so we don't have to read them anymore, anyway.
Also, excellent.
Alrighty. So I'm going to start off by saying Happy New Year to everyone. I think this is our first region meeting of the new year. So I am very, very happy to provide some updates. It'll be a combination of what occurred in December as well as what's occurred in early January. As always, I like to focus in on the 3 district priorities: student safety and well-being, healing and stabilization of the district, and data and accountability for equity. So it's a new year, and I figured I'm going to share my New Year's resolution with you and the community. It is to stay. It's been a interesting Christmas season of reflection for me, December, and I took a lot of time to kind of focus in on who I am as an individual, who I am as a leader, and more so who I want to show up and be. And so I took a lot of time to reflect on and created my leadership resolution for 2025. And so as a leader, my resolution this year is to stay centered on student success by fostering collaboration, cultivating opportunities, and leading with intention and purpose. And in the middle school, during my walkthroughs, one of the things I saw was this quote from Maya Angelou, and I love this quote. It says, "People will forget what you said to them, but they will never forget the way you've made them feel." And so that resonates with me. And I was very happy to see that up in the middle school. And so I wanted to make sure that, you know, it aligned to the resolution that I've set for myself for this year as a leader. Sports. So we'll talk a little bit about athletics later on, but it has been a interesting sports season so far. Winter sports are on the way. We have some sports highlights. I will let you know I've been tracking the team, our basketball team, and our boys basketball. I've been looking at our girls basketball since December. I'm gonna have to start skipping out on parts of the school committee meeting because unfortunately they're scheduling games on Tuesdays, and I want to go see my children play. So. Just know if you ever community and chair, if you ever look up and the superintendent is gone, it's because I want to go and scream in the gymnasium and cheer on my students. Ice hockey is on the way. Boys and girls indoor track, girls Nordic, girls swimming. Coming up, we have varsity boys basketball. They play tomorrow at about 7 p.m. Co-ed ski on Thursday, 5 to 7. And for more information, you can scan the QR code on the page. Great news for the region. One of the things I'm going to talk about is our middle school students. They showcase at the Jones Library. They have a human rights showcase, and I was able to walk and look at all of their, I think it's about 60 or 70 displays. And what the students had to do was they had to explore the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Everyone had one of the different articles. And the 8th graders revised the declaration and compared it to protections of those in the U.S. Constitution as a part of their civics curriculum. Thank you to Dr. Irene LaRoche for inviting myself and Tanya to come in and to see the students' work. We went in and we were able to just read all of them. It was very creative. If you have an opportunity, I think it's up until the end of January, the 31st. So if you have an opportunity, please go and visit the Jones Library. Look at the students' work. It is and what I love was it was acrostics as well. And so there were different shapes, and it represented not just the one article, but what they saw as students, and that speaks testament to the work that's happening at the middle school. Dr. Karita Mayfield was honored with the 2024 Massachusetts Farm to School Kale Blazer Award for the area of education. She was nominated for a dedication to climate justice, her innovative teaching methods, and her contributions to farm to school education. There are the other individuals throughout the state that received this, and so I am just very happy for the work that Dr. Mayfield is doing, and we're going to continue to support her in this endeavor. In our regional classroom, I've started highlighting some of the great things that are happening in the classroom. Seth has been really working to connect with teachers to say, hey, what's happening in your class that's highlighted? So middle school students, the art students are painting a mural on the walls of the middle school, containing the flags of their family's origin, an album cover to represent their life, and anything that they want that is really important to them. There's some work. I was able to hear poems that our students are crafting for the MLK Jr., Martin Luther King Jr. Assembly. And so they've been working on it. And in my walkthrough, I was able to see, students sitting down and creating, not just exploring their interests, but taking that and creating an academic product. In the high schools, the engineering students are getting ready to showcase their projects next Friday. And so they include the Eco Spool, a low-cost, accessible method for recycling 3D printer filament waste. And they also have a design for supporting and recycling trash and composting. So there's a lot of great things that are occurring in our classrooms. And I just encourage everyone to just, keep your eye open, because we're going to continue to highlight what's happening. So we call this the instant replay. And so there were multiple winter concerts that were held, and I had the honor of narrating Santa the Barbarian. I am so grateful to Miss Bear. She got me to come out and stand in front of the auditorium filled with families, and the students were like, where is she? Because I practiced with them. I got it on the first try, yes. And so it was wonderful. The orchestra performed themes from the Nutcracker. The high school performed during the last regional meeting, and again, during the last regional meeting. So again, we're going to either have to work with scheduling regional meetings or scheduling, but it was really great. I am truly grateful for the programs that we are able to offer. And as Shannon talks this evening, we really need to continue to build in and talk about ways to continue to offer these programs to our students. So Yasu, Suzuki, and Ms. Bear, and all of our fine arts teachers, thank you so much for the wonderful work. And I know there's some spring concerts coming up, including, I think they're taking a Montreal trip, so it's really, really wonderful. Upcoming events, we have January 15th, 8th grade and the high school French night from 6 to 9 p.m. And then we have our Martin Luther King Jr. Day on the 20th. There will be no school. However, I know when the students return, there will be their assembly. There is middle school and high school early dismissal on the 22nd and the 23rd. The 24th is all school work day, and then the high school has a Valentine's Day dance. So I'm going to say that with the little bit of enthusiasm I possibly have in my voice. The middle school dance was wonderful. I mean, I heard the music from my office when I came out, and the children were having a great time. So I'm hoping that the high school Valentine's dance follows suit. I wanted to go back over for you and the community, our Power School data breach, and just provide an update. We did talk about the fact that the data that was compromised included students' names, addresses, their date of birth, state IDs, the medical alerts for 78 students, their login credentials, parent and guardian names, some staff work email addresses, and their credentials. We had an anomaly in the system. When I first was told early in the afternoon about the compromise and the breach, it was stated that we do not store social security numbers. That's not our practice. However, there was 12 former students who their social security numbers were in Power School. It was an anomaly. Jerry, Cody didn't even know how this came in. We were trying to figure out how that information was placed, but we did respond timely. We informed everyone, the community, the committees. We secured our servers by closing Power School access to the district systems. As you know, this is not just Amherst, Pelham, or the region. This is nationwide. I reached out to my former district. They too, were contacted. So we removed all social security numbers, which is just the 12, from the system and reinforced our policies, emailing and letting everyone know that the end users do not store social security numbers. All Power School users were prompted to reset their passwords to enhance security. We have been committed to transparency. We are working through our attorneys to address the information, and we began with the district lawyer by sharing all of the correspondences that we've received, correspondences that I've sent, as well as we've been working with Power School and are waiting for them to provide us the response on credit monitoring and the costs. But we will continue to update once we receive that. And we're continually working not just with Power School and our legal team, but Jerry and the whole IS team to ensure that we are not further exposed from the breach. We have received some phishing scams. And of course, we know that was going to happen because email addresses were a part of the data that was dumped. But Jerry was able to go in and kind of, delete some of the things and address it. We're sending emails were sent to staff reminding them to please note, don't open, staff and students don't open, something that that's not for you, or look at the .com.org, look at that STEM before we truly address things. So we are working, and we will continue to work to update everyone on what's happening with Power School, but to ensure that there's safety in our system. And I just want to run through some key snapshot updates and initiatives. First things first, I know that whenever there's a change to cost category or something needs to be shifted in the appropriation of the budget, it has to come to the regional committee. So for us to close out the FY25 budget, there are some items specifically right now, athletics, that we will have to move on to appropriations. The reason is that athletics is currently on the revolving fund, but we are having issues with collecting fees as well as the cost. And so what we are currently is athletics is about $100,000 over. So what we are going to look at is possibly by the end of this fiscal year having to come to the committee to ask upwards of about $175,000 to be put onto appropriations to cover the additional athletics costs that cannot be under revolving fund. What I will tell the committee is that I am saying 175, and I am giving, we are already over 100,000. So I will be letting the director know that we are not to pass the 175 because that is what we are able to afford. We are also working as a district team to determine how best to address athletics so that we are not reducing sports. We are not looking at the impact, but we are able to balance the fact that we have individuals who are unable to pay their fees. And we have individuals who, because they're unable to pay the fees timely, it impacts because we still let our students play. We still accrue that cost, but there's nothing going back into our revolving fund. So that's a discussion that we have to have in terms of how do we provide that equitable access to sports, and what does this look like in terms of the impact. The school year 25-26 school year 25-26 calendar committee, we've met. I met with the elementary calendaring committee, and then we had the broader scope. So this is now, we have a draft that we are going to review on Thursday. Once we review that on Thursday, our goal is Friday. Friday. Once we review that, we'll be sending it to APEA to vote, and then once APEA vote, it'll be coming to this committee, the school committee, for your final vote. So we did go back, we did that work, we laid out some options. We've been tracking instructional hours, instructional days, and so we started off with elementary, we built up to the broader group, and so we will be meeting on Friday to give our final, yep, this is what we agree on, and sending 2 versions to APEA. The middle school principal search is underway. There's in-person forums that are coming forward. There are 3 candidates that will move forward to me by the interview committee. They will be doing forums. So there's some announcements that went out to staff today. I think the committee got the emails. If not, we'll fix that.
You're a
parent.
Oh.
Maybe middle school parents
Got it. So we'll correct that, and we'll make sure that the committee gets it. So regional committee, you'll get it so you have the dates and you can see when everything is moving forward. In my entry findings, one of the things we talked about was creating a portrait of a graduate as a unifier. That work is starting. The contractor, Dr. Allison Leyland, we've been doing planning meetings. The invites have gone out to community stakeholders, and she is actually coming to do a presentation to the committees on for the 27th meeting. That's going to be one of my suggestions for the agenda so that the committee can be aware of what's going to happen. Once we develop the portrait of a graduate, then we will take from there and begin the district improvement plan work and strategic plan work for the district. But our first step is to do the portrait of a graduate, and that work is starting. There are a lot of things that's been happening even prior when I closed out the entry plan. And one of the things I talked about was the past practice of not having things written down. So in my December strategic superintendent's planning team, I don't even know at this point what it's called, but I do know it's our strategic planning team. We did, as a district leadership team, I did explain, one, I walked through my entry findings, and 2, I talked about the fact that there's a list of procedural guidelines, because we don't do policy, you do policy, but I create the guidelines for operating within the policies. So each division director was given a procedural guideline to develop. And so to develop or to update. So for example, HR was given our onboarding, termination, and something else to update. Child nutrition was given our nutritional policies and guidelines. Athletics was given our field trip procedural guidelines, trying not to say policy. The mental health and behavioral services was given our bullying prevention investigation protocols, because we realized that there were gaps in our process when it came to investigation, which, and everything else. So this was assigned in December. It went through 2 presentations. The first one was they did it to the district leadership, where every leader presented what they worked on, as well as a PowerPoint. The idea is that we'll have the procedural guideline, but we'll also have a training tool, a video that we'll have on our district YouTube page, so individuals can go in and see like an overview of each one of the procedural guidelines. We have a set that we're working on this month. The goal is that every month we'll start to hit some very important critical ones across each one of the areas until we're able to, update as much as possible, have as much as possible documented to assist us with our project. So that's definitely something. The next one is resetting expectations for district leaders. In December, I sent an email to everyone saying this is how to communicate with me. Because one of the things was access to the superintendent talking, and I was quite clear, like sometimes you have to send an email. Sometimes because of the roles that we have, I may have to call after hours if something happens. But if you need to reach me and I'm in a meeting, send me a text message, because that works quicker, because sometimes I'm in depth in a meeting, but you need to get to me. I need to say, Dr. Z, I need you to read an email. Send me a text message, Dr. Z. I think that what I've seen for myself, and I said this, is that my leadership style is very different. I know it's different. I know it's a shift, and it's been an adjustment. I think that acceptance, and I'm stuttering because I know what I want to say, but I'm not saying it, so my team is probably very proud of me. But what I've realized is that I am often direct, and in a situation where indirectness was the norm, my directness may be viewed as aggression. And so I think that it's very hard when there's also a stereotype when it comes to you being a person of color, a female of color, that we have to understand that if we want full acceptance, we have to be willing to be open to the fact that there's a different perspective. And I took a lot of time to reflect on that. And so as a leader, the one thing that I'm not going to bend on is the accountability of everyone to do their jobs to keep our children safe and to make this district run. And so I will continue to set expectations. It has been hard for some leaders. I think in a series and a vein that it is somewhat becoming a little bit difficult to address, but more so we want to make sure that it's coming from a place of what's best for this district. There's a central office reorganization, and Shannon will talk about that. One of the things is that looking at how do we consolidate, especially with our current budget cuts. So we're shifting and we're creating a director of operations and looking at an operations unit that has been advertised and posted. We will start interviews until the posting is closed, so those interviews are starting. Also found a way to identify an assistant superintendent position. It's been very creative. So you'll see that posted, and then the finance director is currently posted. So 2 are posted, which is operations. We're going to start interviews. Finance director has been posted, and then you should see within a few days an assistant superintendent posting going up. And I say thank you, and I'm going to start sharing simple quotes, and one is from Simon Sinek, one of my favorites. And I often share quotes with my team and in my writings. Leadership is not about being in charge, it's about taking care of those in your charge, and that's very important to me. So thank you, and that's my update.
All right, Jennifer.
Thank you so much for these updates, Dr. Z. I especially love seeing like the glimpses into student life, like the athletics updates and the music. Like I really appreciate that. It helps remind me, at least, helps refocus me on like why we're all here and what we're doing. I have some questions about Power School. Is Power School back up and running?
Yes.
Okay. And so if for parents, if we have a parent account, we should be able to go back in and see what
We are approaching the end of the semester,
Uh-huh.
so it is closed to parents, so that
Gotcha.
grading and everything can be updated.
Okay. Thank you for handling that and for communicating so clearly with the district and the school committee about it. And this might not be a question for you, but the most surprising thing I read in your update was that Power School paid the ransom. And I was like, why would you? I don't know. Is that typical? And like, your note said that it is typical. People are nodding. I don't know how these things work. Your note said that they got confirmation that the data actually was deleted, or that the ransom people didn't keep it or hold it. Like, it just seems crazy a little to me that you would. Anyway, thank you.
My team kept me updated, and so I mean, what they were told, I was told, and that's what I provided.
All right, thank you.
Sarah?
I didn't write all my questions down, but so what you said near the end of your report interests me. These 2 positions, Director of Operations and Assistant Superintendent. First of all, I have no idea where to look to see the postings when they're done. I'd be interested.
ARPS.org, Human
There's-
Resources, Career Opportunities.
Okay, thank you. It used to be Spring.
Yeah,
Why
it's
Spring?
the link.
Oh,
It says
it
schools.
goes-
It says school spring. So once you go
Schools.
on career opportunities,
see.
you hit there and
Okay.
it'll be there.
Okay, thank you. Can you tell me what will the Director of Operations do? What does that mean? Is that
Sure. So the director of operations will be over facilities, custodial, maintenance, the construction projects, and now food services, child nutrition. So I'm taking all of the operational units and combining them under one. And so it will have one umbrella position, which is the director of operations. Under the director of operations, it'll have 3 program managers, one that's over food services and child nutrition, one that's over custodial and transportation, one that's over facilities and special projects.
okay? Thank you. And do you must know, since it's about to be advertised, what will the assistant superintendent's piece of the work be? Or will that change as is needed?
So
Or is it-
the job description was written in a way where they understand the priorities of the district: family engagement, student services, instructional leadership, fiscal management. So we're looking for a strong candidate that can mirror and support. For me, I've learned that over my years, one of the key things, and I'm getting stronger at it, is sharing leadership, a balanced leadership where we're both able to sit in a room and have that direct conversation. And so for me, I'm looking for that person to share the district with, that either one of us can step in and support, but then they will have specific roles.
Tillman?
I have a question about what you said about athletics and the budget. Is it a reallocation of resources that we approve from different accounts, or is athletics actually spending more money than we had budgeted?
So okay, Shannon's on there. She can jump in when she's ready. So athletics is not appropriated on our account, on the budget. Shannon, you want to jump in and explain this before I batch it up?
So athletics is mainly funded by the revolving fund. Majority of the funding, not some of the salaries aren't on there. And we did have a balance of unexpended balance that we would carry and would help support, and we'd bring in revenue, et cetera, et cetera. And I did an analysis of our revolving funds and found that we were slowly bringing in less money over time in the athletics revolving fund, and our expenses have been increasing. And when I did our month-end review, the revolving fund is in a deficit, and we haven't brought in additional funds. So I'm hoping we'll be close to what we've already spent now, but if we don't, then we'll have to shift, we'll have to essentially do a journal entry to move that funding from the revolving fund onto appropriations.
A follow-up?
Yeah, so thanks for explaining it, and thanks for noticing that that's happening, and so that's great to know that somebody's checking it. I'm just not sure why we're then subsidizing athletics, right? We are in a situation where the budget is tight. We've talked about all kinds of cuts that we need to make, and it seems to be implied that we agree to subsidize athletics.
We didn't agree.
Right. So,
Yeah.
You implied it in some way by saying at the end of
I
the
know,
year you
I
will
know.
come and ask for a journal entry, and I just want to point out that athletics is not a core academic mission of the school, and so I think we should have a conversation before we expend additional funds to athletics if this is even something we want to do. And I know this is not popular, but yeah.
So Shannon and I did have that conversation, and what we're trying to do is project out. And this was one way to introduce and see and feel for how it would and would not make it through the committee and have that conversation. We just weren't prepared to have the full conversation tonight. I do know that some of this is the fact that we've already expended some of it, so we are we're already there, and that ties back to why it's very difficult for us to move things through our purchase order system, because we are having a deeper conversation around alignment and expenditures and when you put in requisitions. So when you have individuals who are putting in requisitions and saying that they are requisitioning something, and this is not athletics, I'm saying this is a broader problem, and this is why Shannon is doing this work. We have individuals who may be putting in a requisition for $5,500, but the attached documentation says that it's only supposed to be $1,800, and so now we're stopping it. I'm stopping it. I'm like, no, it's not moving through, and it's becoming a pushback with individuals within the districts. So we are working, Tillman, to try and clean up all of our finances and how things move through. This is why she caught it, because Shannon has been on it, running those numbers, not just in the athletics revolving fund, We're looking at our special education revolving fund because, again, if we have, there are positions on there that we can't hold or sustain for next year. So I do agree, and I did phrase it in that way because athletics is also part of the reason that gets our children to come to school, to be in the academics and get them to shift and be successful. But we may not be able to sustain all of our athletics for the rest of this year, and that's a very hard conversation. So I do know that I need to bring this back to the committee to have the conversation as to whether or not it's one that we want to agree to. I just wanted to at least have that in my usual proactive way, that preemptive conversation of, hey guys, this is what we're facing.
And I just want to say that in regards to FY26, we did not budget additional funds on the operating budget for athletics. That is budgeted on the revolving fund, which we will need to continue to evaluate when we develop that budget to make sure that what we put in is going to match um, and or be less than what we bring in revenue, so that we're not in this position in 26.
I have William, Sarah, Deb, Irv, and Bridget. William?
So I guess this is just a comment on something that I feel like I've asking for, and we haven't really received yet. But in your district priorities, you have number 1, student safety, well-being.
I can answer you because I met with Seth today. You're asking about the release of the BRIM data, not?
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
The bullying numbers.
Yes.
Sorry.
And
For those
so,
who don't know what BRIM is, I apologize.
Yes, BRIM is our bullying platform. We did work on it, however, we did not release it in December, so the one we have is up until December 19th. I did ask him today to update it up until January when we come for our next meeting. So I think we're going to update it for the end of this week, release it to the public like was suggested, and then have it to present for the next one.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sarah?
Yeah, about the athletics situation, finances. First of all, I don't recall, I mean, I've only been on the committee 1 year. We did not approve athletic fees. So I don't know when they were last set. And I understand that if people can't pay, some people can't pay what it is now, they're even less able to pay it if they go up. But as I recall, there were different levels, like if, you know, you could pay a full amount or maybe an extra amount. So maybe that's something to revisit. It would only affect this spring. I mean, hasn't been registration for spring sports yet, I assume. So that's one thought. And then second of all, does the athletics department, perhaps, does the director communicate with the boosters, the hurricane boosters? Because it would be, I don't know how they decide what to purchase or give money toward for the department, but maybe what they could do right now is just give the cash.
Sorry, I was gonna say they do.
Okay.
They do communicate. One of the things I would say is that this was one of the first years that the director was able to delve into the budget really and understand and have that clear insight into it, ask her questions. So we've been meeting with her since October, November, and hashing out different things, tracking. Right now we're looking at even software for when individuals come to the games so that we can go ahead and, thank you, Kate. So we can go ahead and collect revenue that way. I do know that what Kate just sent was that athletics fees has not increased in over 5 years, but we still know that it's been a hardship to collect the fees, as well as there's an option for individuals to donate for other, like to just donate, like even if you can. So we've been having that conversation, and again, my heartstrings pull at the fact that I don't want to tell individuals they can't play. But I think we're going to end up in a place where we might just even have to reduce the number of sports because we really aren't able to even afford it. So there'll be a deeper conversation, but I think for us is how do we balance what we have with what we would like to do.
Deb?
Hi, I have a bunch of things, so I'm just gonna run down them, because the last one is questions. Thank you for looking for a position in our district for an assistant superintendent. I think it's essential part of the district's success as well as your success. So I was flabbergasted that we didn't have one. And it's one of, one of my highest priorities when we were looking for a new superintendent, people said, will they be successful? And I said, if they have a strong team, and that's an important part of it. Your ability to delegate a complete task, your ability to focus on a complete task while somebody else can focus on the district as a whole. I just think that's essential, as well as in a district that has had communication problems and process problems, to have multiple leadership people to speak to, I think is really an important part. That kind of redundancy, I know it would be assistant, but that kind of redundancy is an important part of addressing our past mistakes. So that's the superintendent thing. I had the same question about the boosters. I know that with the coming new administration at the national level, there have been requests of the committee from the public to find out what our procedures will be regarding undocumented students and protections, as well as any kind of adjustments that occur at the national level to the Title IX laws. So as you mentioned, that's your ballpark, and policy is ours, so.
And the Title IX laws, I was told by the attorneys, were just, I think, updated on Friday again.
Yeah.
So of course, there's some revisions that's gonna
course.
come in that way.
Yeah.
Right now, what we did tell the community when that initial release of election and everything else came out in November is that we would abide by the school committee policy.
Yeah.
But we do need to write out a procedural guideline, and so that is on the list.
Yeah.
In terms of who calls who, what happens when, because it says that, you know, it clearly says the superintendent and the attorney is supposed to receive this, but
Yes.
there's a step that needs to happen after that. When they come to the school, do you let them into the schools, or what do you do? So we need to hash that out. So it is on the list that I have of things that we need to address. I also created a kind of run through the school committee policies. Naibi, in her compliance role, she was tasked with reviewing all of the school committee policies and making sure that there was a supplemental guideline that we had documented for how it goes. We do not, and so we're working on that as well. So it will be a little procedural development over the next few months.
And then the last thing I wanted to bring up is some clarity about the athletic budget. Because back when we were duking it out over turf versus natural grass, one of my concerns was maintenance of the field. And one of the community members who had contacted me and said, you know, I support natural grass, my concern remains, but at the time was we didn't have the money in our budget to maintain that. This community member mentioned to me that it was built into our budget several years prior. And it wasn't until I went and dug into the revolving funds that I found that. But I also found some other things that I was confused about. So it seems to me like it seems like some positions sit in the revolving funds. We fund some staff positions in the athletic office.
I don't think the athletics, is it athletics? No.
So like the director and the clerical, that's on our operating budget, but
Right.
there are some coaching stipends that do come out of the athletics revolving, but not a full salary of a staff member.
But there are other revolving funds that that staff is paid off of.
Okay.
Not athletic staff, but other programs. Their staff paid on revolving.
Okay,
funds.
so this deficit is just focused on, it has nothing to do with COLAs or anything like that. It just has to do with collection of fees? Okay. No.
No, the deficit you're
The
asking?
deficit for
No,
the.
it's not just collecting of fees. It's our ability to generate revenue. And so it's collection of sports fees from students, collection of fees at the gate, at the entrance. Like that's been, I think, when we looked at it, Shannon, you went back 5 years.
Yeah, for the past 5 years, we had more money collection in like 2015, 2016, and then it has just slowly declined.
Okay.
Irv?
This is actually hard to follow, and I think that one of the reason for it is that when you have an athletic director, and the athletic director is part of the regular budgeting process, but yet he's a part of an athletic program, and then we say, well, we have athletic programs, and there are deficits that aren't being covered because there's a revolving fund, and so the question arises, what is the athletic department? And as A. B, how is the athletic department funded? Right? And C, if the athletic department is funded by revolving funds, why is that? The question, the overall question is, athletics cannot be thought of, in my mind, as an afterthought. It's a part of our schools. And if you said to students at the middle school and high school that this is not a part of our schools, it is something that is extra, it would be shocking. Athletics are a really critical part of education, and that we are talking about it as if, well, you know, it's being covered by revolving funds. We don't have enough revolving funds, so in the spring we might cut some athletics out. That is not fair. It is not proper. It is not the right way to go about doing this at this particular point in time. The community certainly wouldn't understand. I don't understand. So we need to develop some clarity here and say to the community, here is the athletic program. Here are the actual costs of the athletic program. And here's the budget that is needed for that. And if the schools can't cover that budget during the regular budgeting process, that needs to be put out there. It cannot be put out there in terms of, well, we will have an athletic program if the fees that the students have to pay, by the way, some students can't pay those fees because they don't have the money, the families don't have the money. And so we need to figure out what to do about that. But that to say to the community that we are treating, in effect, athletics as an afterthought in terms of our budget. I do not think the community understands that. Athletics is not an afterthought. We need to put that into our regular budgeting process. We need to make that clear. And those costs need to be put out there and put as part of the regular budgeting process. We don't even know what those costs are because we're saying it's been done by a revolving fund, which is shocking.
Okay, so I wanted to answer his 3 questions.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay.
And then I think we should put the athletics as a separate agenda item.
Okay.
For another time.
So, one, the athletic, and I'm going to just answer all 3 together real quickly. So one, we have a very talented individual running the athletics department. Our athletics director works extremely hard. She's probably at the gate and the door right now. So she works to get those items in. She has one clerical assistant who's assigned to her that works with the bookkeeping and assisting and the documentation. So it's 2 individuals in this athletic department. When I came in and we started this conversation, I believe when we started the whole development of the budget and working together in the region, her division, athletics was the first division that we met with. In the conversation, it was clear that she had not been like really a part of the budgeting process of how things work and where it goes. And that's when we started to go line by line into the budget. Shannon created a document that showed what was previously spent, what was previously brought in, where we are, how we're moving, and has been updating that conversation. We were able to talk about things or invoices that were still open that we did not even know was open at that time that had not been paid. There was different critical costs to running the athletics department. However, knowing that the FY25 budget was already approved, this is what we came in and we met, this is how the practice has been. What the conversation right now is, and we've had it with the athletics director, and we will continue, like she's aware that I'm having this conversation this evening because I told her about where it is and that we would have a follow-up conversation with the budget team, is that we can't continue to, and this isn't just her, this is across the region, because this is a regional meeting, we cannot continue to put things on or individuals, programs, and fund them one way, but run them another. We have to be very clear on how we line item, what we're doing, what is our budget, what does it cost per sport, what does it cost per program, per person. So it is a very daunting and difficult conversation, and I do feel like I am often the person coming and bringing the difficult conversations, but at the same time, that is the only way that as a community we can come together and adjust it and fix it, and this is the transparency that's been asked for. So Irv, I am not talking about athletics as an afterthought, and I don't think anyone is. What we're saying is that we know our fiscal situation and it is unfair, that this is how it has been for many years, and this is now where we are at. And we are projecting out, if we continue on that path, this is where we are possibly going to be. There are some things that we are working on. There are some things that we still have to have conversations about, and that's why I said we weren't really prepared to have the full-blown conversation tonight. But it also helps me to have this little bit of a tidbit, because what I've learned is, based on what I hear here, it helps me to guide and plan appropriately for the next steps. So it is a difficult conversation, but this is one where the formula was already written, and now we're trying to figure out how does that formula work for the situation that we're in.
I mean, I appreciate that, Dr. Z.
Bridget?
And all I would.
Irv, do you have a
all
follow-up
I want-
question?
Yes,
Okay.
all I would like to be understood is, for me, I had always thought this was a budgeting cost center. Now I'm understanding that it is a quasi-budgeting cost center. And what I would like for to happen, Dr. Z, is to have a full illustrative budget outline for athletics. And then we can determine how we go about funding it. But I do not wish and do not want athletes out there or the community out there to think that, hey, you really weren't a part of our budgeting process. In fact, that you are an afterthought. But budgetarily, you have been an afterthought because you've never been a part of the regular budgeting process. And all I'm saying, let's make it a part of the budgeting process and then see where that falls out. And yes, Sarah Bess, I agree with you. We need to have this as a regular, a part of a regular agenda of the school committee.
Bridget?
So the first thing I wanted to do was just thank you, Dr. Z. Like, we can see how busy you are and how many things you've been working on. And one thing I'm really happy about is the procedural guidelines, and then that bullying was put first. I think I'm just really happy to see that. I wanted to mention that in the policy stuff around undocumented folks or new forthcoming Americans, right? Like in the process of that you should talk with the district attorneys. I was at a great presentation related to the work that the district attorneys are, because there's laws at the state, there's different counties, different agencies, and all those can give us walls to keep those further out from the school,
Okay.
right?
I will, thank you.
I agree revolving funds should be part of the regular budget discussion. I think like that's something that it would be great for us to see as we go. And I just do recall, because 5 years ago, my son was signing up for a team that was cut, because at that time they had to cut teams and reduce things due to the budgeting. And there was discussion at that time of a sliding scale that was more than just like, oh, donate if you have extra, but like we have a very bifurcated income stratification in our community. And so people who have higher incomes could pay, 150 or 200% of the real cost versus other folks not paying and middling out somewhere. I think maybe, but I do think coming to something for spring would be good, because, and the very last thing I had was about the central office reorg. I'd love to see an org chart, some sort of timeline. Are any school committee members going to be on here hiring committee? And last, and circling back to the question, like, where are those funds coming from? Are we losing positions? What's going on with that?
I'm leaving that part for Shannon, because that's a part of the FY26 conversation. I know that we were asked to kind of identify what positions would be possibly cut and adjusted, and so there has been some reorgan and shifting of positions. Like if people leave, I'm kind of shifting and collapsing positions at the central office. But yes, there are some positions that will have to be cut even afterwards.
But you said you've posted now, right? But you also you're
So
talking.
that July 1,
Okay.
some individuals could start.
Thanks.
Tillman?
For when we have the discussion around athletics, I want to just note that I disagree with almost everything that Irv said about athletics and being an integral part of education, and other than that we have to have a discussion around it.
Thank you.
Anna?
So I'm going to save my athletics comment for later. But I know that I sent some documents about green opportunities and grant opportunities, and I was just wondering who takes the lead on these kinds of things, and is this something that the school committee should have a role in, but we are not taking a role in, or is this something that really just needs to be handled on your end?
So a lot of whenever anyone sends me grant opportunities, I usually forward them to Shannon. And she kind of goes in and does some deeper research, looks at what the requirements are, and then she works with the unit or director to kind of make it happen. I know some of what you sent, we already had other things in line, and I think she's going to talk about one of them too with the electric bus. So that's kind of what happens right now. When I send it to her, she does the research. We're looking at how we're going to handle federal grants and things as well, different grant writing. So she kind of does the grant writing too. And I don't know. I mean, technically the budget is supposed to kind of fall under the school committee. So if you guys want to pull up some grant writing, pull up your sleeves and do some grant writing as well. We welcome support. It's a collaborative effort. So I wouldn't say no.
William?
I just wanted to say, when we have the athletic conversation, that we also think about funding through MOAs and the utilizations of our region's facilities outside of athletics as
Definitely.
part of ways to fund athletics.
Definitely. Thank you.
All right. Anything further? All right. Shannon, our FY Four Towns follow-up.
Yes. So, Dr. Z, are you going to pull it up so it shows on the big screen, or did you want me to present it on here?
I have it up. You just say next one you want me to click, because that's all I'm doing. This is your presentation.
Ooh, I'm sorry.
Okay. I just want to say from the Zoom meeting, it just looks blank, so I can't see anything on there. So I'm just going to look at it on my screen, too.
Okay.
Point of order, is there a way of turning up the volume on that?
We have already asked.
Okay.
No.
Oh, okay. I'll try to talk loud. Is this better?
Yes, thank you.
It sounds like I'm yelling.
That's
Not
okay.
like
Yell
Not
at us.
here.
Okay, so you can go to.
It's up there. It's the.
Go ahead, Shannon, tell me. First slide?
I can go?
Yes.
Yeah, so the second slide. So on this slide, it goes over our assumptions that we've seen several times, so I won't go over them, but there are two updates that I put on this presentation. One is previously, at the last Four Towns meeting, we had said the OPEB funding would be at 115. I have it at 144, and I will explain that on another slide. And I added to our budget approximately $80,000 for an electric bus lease, which I also have a slide about. So I wanted to go over some of those changes that I added into the budget. So on the next slide, it was brought to my attention that our OPEB, that we have a funding schedule for OPEB that I wasn't aware of. So when I pulled up the schedule and looked at where we should be for 2026, it would be budgeted amount of 120,000. However, when I went back to see what we did contribute over the past few years versus what we should have contributed based on this schedule, we have under contributed what the school committee voted on in 2016 or 2017 for this OPEB schedule, and it's underfunded by 48,000. So we had already put in 115 for this budget. If we put in the additional 48,000 that we underfunded, it would be at 168. However, I'm proposing that we cut that number in half, the 48,000, and we fund half of the amount that we're underfunded this year, and the other half in 27, so that we're back on track then. So that OPEB funding would now be 144.83. On the next slide, we have the electric bus leasing. This was also new to me. We had worked with Highland Fleets to apply for grants on behalf of the district. There's over $1 million in grants to electrify our bus fleets, and we also had funding in capital for electric buses as well. And with Highland Fleet applying for these grants on our behalf, they would purchase, own, and lease the three buses back to the district at a cost to us, which would be $80,000 per year for all three buses. And this would be a contract for 10 years, which will ultimately require the town's approval because of the length of the contract. If we didn't do this, it would go against what we said as a district, that we would work to, electrify the fleet and energy savings and all of those sorts. I had a long discussion with the director of facilities around this. If we didn't do this, we would also lose approximately $1 million. Oh, is somebody saying something?
No,
No.
go ahead.
We would approximately lose the 1 million in funding if we didn't move forward. We don't have to pay Highland Fleet any money to do any of this. They maintain ownership, but they would do all of the charging infrastructure, the engineering, the design, the construction. They pay for all of the utilities. The only thing that we don't pay for, they do all of the maintenance on the bus, is if the bus needed new tires. So we'd like to proceed moving forward with this, and because of that, I added the 80,000 into the budget, and we had to make a determination if we were going to move forward or not.
Shin, do you want us to ask questions in the middle or As you will, or all at the end?
Can we get to the end? I know
Can we
this
do it at
committee-
the end, just so that because
never
it's
get
hard for me
Okay.
to tell if somebody. Yeah,
Fair.
let's just.
I got your hand though, Anna.
Okay, but so what I did was I didn't want to read this slide verbatim, but I put all of the information that I could possibly fit on this slide, so you had it. So those were the two biggest updates. So if we go to the next slide, it changes what our total expenses is, or from what was presented at Four Towns to 37.684, 458. So I just wanted to show you that new version. So you can skip to the next slide, which will bring us down to what I wanted to discuss around our assessment method with the Four Towns. So with that new number, I plugged that into the top of the operating budget for FY26. And this graph right here shows what it would be what it would require from each of the towns to fully fund our schools, as if we didn't take any deficits. So with that, we can go down to the next slide. This slide, I wanted to show you a possibility. The towns spoke of two things. They spoke of wanting to get back towards the statutory method, the modified statutory method that we call it, that's in our regional agreement. And they wanted to get away from the guardrail method. So what I'm going to present is the statutory method and then a potential hybrid that takes us away from the guardrail method but still kind of relates it back to the statutory method. So for the statutory method, my thought is, if the towns want to move towards that, well, what could it look like if we really did just use that method and we didn't do any hybrid method? And at the top here, you'll see a negative number of a 1.1 million deficit, 16,000. So that means that Amherst would be at a 4% increase. Pelham would be at a 22, Leverett at 13%, and Shutesbury at 6.1. But what I wanted to show you is, instead of looking at this and saying, oh, those numbers, that percentage is unattainable for the towns to do, I wanted us to look at the increases and look at it for the dollars and not the percentage. So if you go to the next slide, what does the statutory method increase mean if we were to do something like this and ask for the towns? How much is that increase from FY25 to FY26? So for Amherst, it would be 754,000. For Pelham, it's 234,000. Leverett, 216, and Shutesbury, 111,000. And it would leave us at a potential deficit of $1 million. Taking into account all the information we have now. Is that potentially doable by the towns? Could we go back to the towns before we have our next Four Towns meeting, and would they have resources to do this? And in doing this, it would align us for the future years to use the statutory method, to take the hit on the chin, as you would say, now, and skip the hybrid model and really just do what we worked hard to agree upon in our regional agreement. It only requires 2/3 majority vote from the towns, and we don't have to vote the assessment method because it's already agreed upon. So if we go to the next slide, this slide, I wanted to bring it up again, is how we used to do this with the guardrail method, showing we start on the left, and then we go down to the bottom right-hand corner where each town hits the 4% guardrail. And what does that deficit look like right now? It's 1.4 million if we were to do the guardrail method. But we want to look at a hybrid model. So if we go to the next slide, the hybrid model will require all four towns to approve the assessment method. It will need to be approved by DESE prior to voting. And this model that I'm going to show you is going to be a 4% increase overall for the budget, and it's just divided up differently for the towns. So it's still going to be a deficit of 1.4. So the next two slides, I will warn you, they get a little deep in the numbers, and I'm going to do my best to explain it. You can move on to the next one. So you did see the slide at four towns, which this talked about on the top left-hand corner. You see FY25 and FY26. This is the 6% increase for 25. Using the modified statutory method, what would the assessment be for each town? And it has a total of 25,523,869. Of that total, what is the percentage of the pie that Amherst, Pelham, and Leverett and Shutesbury pay? So you take that, you take Amherst 20 million and divide it by the 25 million total. You get Amherst at 79.92%, and so on for each of the other towns. And so that means, based on the statutory method, that's the share of the pie that the towns should pay. When you look at that same math and you do it on the guardrail method, it skews away, and it skews away from the statutory method because it's just a flat increase overall and it doesn't take into account. So now Amherst is at 81.23%, Pelham's at 4.6, Leverett at 7.4, and Shutesbury at 7.13. So if we were to apply the 4% overall to the budget, but use the statutory method percentage of assessment, where it has the Amherst at 79, Pelham at 5.3, use those percentages to divide up the 4% increase. What does that mean for each of the towns? So you can see Amherst has a $437,000 increase. It's only 2.32%. Pelham would be at 2.95%, and so on. So that was presented at four towns, and we were asked to come up with the hybrid model. So the first thing that I thought, if you go to the next slide for considering hybrid model, is we already know Amherst is going to give us 3% across the board. They said they will give all of their departments 3%. So if Amherst, using that statutory method percentage on the previous slide, was only at 2.32, but they're going to give us 3%, then that means they're covering more of the piece of the pie than they would using that method. So we can start to create the hybrid by basing this off of Amherst's 3%. And what I did here was I took the sum of, so we're going to skip looking at the top, and we're just going to start by looking at sum of Pelham, Leverett, Shutesbury statutory method percentage. It says 20.08%. That's the total of the 5.3%, 7.54%, 7.24% of the statutory method percentage of assessment combined for Pelham, Leverett, and Shutesbury only. And we know that Amherst now at 3% will cover 80.45% of the pie instead of just 79.92, which means that only 19.55% of the pie is left to be covered. But Pelham, Leverett, and Shutesbury would have needed to cover 20.08%. So the difference between those two numbers is what Amherst would be covering with their 3%, and it's 0.53%. And if we were to take that difference, divide it by 3, maybe it's not done like this, but this was the simplest way I could put it. Divide it by 3, it's 0.18%. So we take Pelham's 5.3% from the statutory method percent of assessment, and we deduct 0.18%, and we do that for Leverett and Shutesbury. So now Pelham is paying less of the pie, same with Leverett and Shutesbury, because Amherst is at the 3%. So I I took the percentages from Pelham, Leverett, Shutesbury, the new percentages after the 0.18% was deducted, and I multiplied um, 24,119,245 by those percentages to figure out what each town would pay in this hybrid model. It doesn't change the fact that we're still only at a 4% budget overall increase for FY26. The only thing this changes is the way the amount is divided up between the towns. Either way, we're still at a 1.4 deficit in this case. So I know this is a lot of numbers and it's probably hard to follow. So I'll be happy to answer questions on that once we continue on. So my apologies. Okay, so moving down to the next slide. So how does the hybrid model increase compared to the statutory method option? So if we use what's in our regional agreement, the modified statutory method, the increase for each town is listed in the first column. If we use the hybrid model that I suggested, the increase is here, and the difference between the two are on the right-hand side. So I wanted to display this to say, well, is it worth it to do the hybrid model? Is it worth it to have to revote what our assessment method is and to do this for a couple more years until we can get back to the statutory method? Or should we just go back to the statutory method? I don't know. That's up for discussion. So on the next slide is a summary I have. The modified statutory method, it only requires 2/3 vote. The potential deficit that I've presented tonight is 1,016,000. It's an overall 5.68% increase to the budget. It aligns with it aligns the towns going forward for fiscal years to come to use the statutory method where we won't have these as big percentages as they are now because we won't be using this guardrail method, which has taken us so far away from it. And it honors the hard work that we've already done in the past that we agreed that we would use for our assessment method. For the hybrid model, it will require all 4 towns to approve the assessment method. The potential deficit in this scenario is 1.4, so it's only an overall 4% increase to the budget. It's going to require DESI's approval prior to the town voting, the commissioner's approval after we send it to DESI, and we need to make sure that that's approved, and which can be risky because if the towns go through and they vote this, but it's not approved by the commissioner, we're in an even worse spot. And a plus to this, though, is that it is starting to work towards getting the towns back to the statutory method. So, with that said, what does this deficit mean for our schools? So I put together an overall, a broad view of what this deficit will entail for the district. I'll just skip to the bottom right now. We're at a 1.2 million that we have found in potential reductions, which it's hard to work towards a number where you don't know what the number is going to be. Is it a million deficit? Is it a 1.4? So we will finalize this obviously as it gets closer. So within central office, we have reductions within the business office, operations, facilities, food service, around what Dr. C mentioned with the director of operations and making that work along with the assistant superintendent. I want to remind you that any position that's listed under central office is split district. So if there is a position that is reduced, it affects all 3 districts. So it's not, okay, this position is reduced, that's the full salary taking out of one district.
Shannon, can I say something real quick?
Yes.
So I'm glad that Shannon pointed that out because I know this is a region meeting, but the central office serves 3 districts. And so each of the districts are facing budget cuts. And so essentially, the central office, regardless, will have to make a cut. Go ahead, Shannon.
Um, so right now we found between restructuring and reducing approximately 161,000, which is a total of 5 positions for the central office. For the high school and middle school, we have it broken out by unit. Unit A is teachers, Unit B is clerical, and Unit C is paras. At the high school, we're at approximately 11 positions total, and at the middle school, we are at 8 positions total. And for the the overall total is 24 positions in the district. So on the next slide, we have the location percent share of reduction versus percent share of the budget. When I take the total payroll only, we're not talking about expenses, but just the payroll. Central office accounts for 5% of the payroll, the high school is 65%, and the middle school is 30% of the payroll. In the blue column, that is the percent share of reduction by area. So they're all central office, high school, and the middle school are all receiving a similar level of reduction. But it's hard to see that when you just see the numbers on the previous screen, because the sizes of the central office, the high school, and the middle school are different and they vary. So with that, I didn't go into too much detail of what these positions will be. I think it's still too early to completely finalize that until we should have by January 31st the health insurance and some other finalized numbers when the governor's budget comes out. But we didn't want to go into too much detail until we really know what we're working with, what our assessment method is going to be, so we know what our deficit is, and we know where our actual operating budget is going to land. So with that, we can take questions.
First, thank you, Shannon. This looks like a lot of mind-boggling work. So
She's awesome.
very, very impressive, and thank you for your attention to detail with all of this. Okay, so far I have on the list Anna, Deb, Tillman, Sarah, and Jennifer. And we can start in that order and go on from there. Anna.
So I have,
And Arf.
I guess, 2 questions. The first one is related to the buses. You mentioned that it's like $80,000 a year to lease 3 electric buses. And what would the cost be if they were regular, like what, diesel or gas buses?
That's a good question, but I do want to say we have 3 buses that we have to take off the road now, that we have to get rid of regardless, that we would have to replace, which would be capital expenses. I can't remember.
That we own currently.
Yes.
And so
that
instead
are-
of owning these 3 buses, we will lease these 3 other buses
Right.
for
Oh.
$80,000 a year for 10 years.
Tillman has an answer to your
So
question.
just the order of
Ballpark.
magnitude, a gas regular school bus is around 100K and then electric around 350,
To buy them.
400. Plus, you have to add maintenance and everything. So they're 3 or 4 times as expensive if they're electric. And I just want to be clear, I love electric, but
But they're these grants.
But, so how do the grants help us then?
So the grants are covering most of all of the charging infrastructure, the design, the construction. We are not paying for any additional maintenance. Like, it would be a flat fee it would be 80,000 to use the bus. We're not paying, the only thing that we would be paying
like a
for
lot.
is if the bus needed tires. But if there was any maintenance, anything went wrong with it during the year, we're not responsible for that cost. That would be Highland Fleets.
So I think
I think
the
it sounds that expensive.
so the
not that
comparison. So the comparison is if we had to buy a bus for 354, we had to maintain that bus. We had to build a charging infrastructure. It would cost just to get it up off the ground running. It would be over $1 million. Let's say per bus. I think around right. But I comparing that tree just to purchase it for 350 to leasing it for 80. We're not covering the maintenance. We only cover tires. They're doing the charging infra. It took some time, Anna, because I too pushed back on the team, and it took me some time to understand. And so they did the walkthrough with me. But a lot of, if you think about a lot of the grants that you send and over, these are things that they are actually also offering. A lot of the grants are not just giving us the funds. Taking away the having to maintain a vehicle alone is a awesome cost cut. And so we will definitely vet all the paperwork with legal to make sure that we're in compliance. But I think that when we compare the cost of just owning the bus versus 80,000 for the 10 years of leasing, maintaining, if something goes wrong, they're responsible except for tires. You know,
But it's 80K per bus, not 80K for all three.
Shannon, clarify.
No, it's 80K for all three.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought
Okay.
it said per bus.
All right, thank you.
It's
And then the second,
Per bus.
the second,
Shannon, can you clarify because the slide says per bus?
Where?
Electric. Go 80,
Oh wait, I turned
I
off my
saw
thing.
it somewhere.
It said will be approximately 80,000 per year to lease the buses.
Lease the buses.
It says annual cost per bus.
For the
Where?
next 10 years.
That same sentence. The annual cost per bus for the next 10 years.
Oh, you can't see it, right?
It's the
Oh,
second to
no,
last
I
bullet.
have it pulled up on my screen. Okay, I think that's a typo.
Okay.
Okay.
'Cause I went over this with Rupert several times.
okay.
But
So
while
the-
we're here, I'm gonna go back.
The second question was over the total budget. And so in the modified statutory method, you start with like a 1.016 budget deficit. And I'm just kind of wondering why you're comparing that deficit as the starting point. Because if we start with that much of a deficit, then we're looking at like a 6% increase in a budget that we can't afford. So now you're modifying it, and so you're applying the guardrails and saying, okay, this is actually what we can afford, and then you're redistributing it after the guardrails to find a different way to apply the same budget in a way that gets us closer to the statutory method. But
So-
why are we starting with the 1.016 deficit is I guess
So
my
the
question.
So where you see the 1 million deficit and then when we discuss the hybrid, those are two separate things. They're unrelated.
Yeah, but why are we starting with the $1 million deficit?
Yeah,
Or-
why a 4%?
So that's what so in order to when we look at the statutory method, if we're not going to receive funds to fully fund the schools. So we have to put in some number to reduce by and see where the other towns land. I can put in any number and we can figure out where that is. But what I did strategically was put in what number would be to get Amherst at 4% and see where the other towns fall. And so when we do that, because we know it is 1,016,000. Amherst ends up at 4% and see where the other towns are. If we wanted Amherst to be at 3%, I could do that too. It's not necessarily applying a guardrail. It's not applying a guardrail at all. It's just putting in a number that we're going to reduce by and seeing what happens down at the bottom. I thought for us,
I get it.
maybe Amherst would, yeah, and maybe Amherst would do 4%, and maybe the towns could support us at the other levels.
Yep, I get it now. Thanks.
Deb?
Hi, thanks for all this. The nerd in me loves all the numbers and all the iterations of it. I don't understand our capital budget. I'm not sure I've ever seen it, but I don't understand it. And it helps me in my conversations with the town to understand a little bit better. It seems like if we were to borrow for buses, if we were to purchase 3 buses, whatever kind they were, that request or that authorization, the towns would have the option of declining them. So we would say, let's buy the buses, and then it goes to the towns, and if they don't say no, then they borrow that money for the buses. But it also seems like we have capital costs that we pay out of our budget. So I don't understand how the region funds big things like this and small things like Chromebooks. I know that all of the departments have relatively small lines for equipment. I don't want to say materials.
No.
But the big regional stuff, could you give me and then the other question is, when you say statutory, do you mean state statutory or the modified statutory? Our statutory, the one that everybody's agreed to.
Yeah. So I'll answer the last question
Yeah,
first.
that's easier.
So I guess I've kind of said it interchangeably. I'm just referring to what's in our regional agreement.
Okay, thank you.
In regards to capital, we have a capital budget that we vote on every year. And sometimes there are IT needs in there for if we were going to buy X amount of Chromebooks. Most of it is facility needs. And that's where we fund all of our capital. We don't fund any of the capital out of the operating budget. We have older capital accounts from the year prior. Perhaps this project didn't get finished yet that we still do in the next year, and it carries on. So
Okay.
I'm not really sure what you're looking for.
So the follow-up would be then, when we needed to repair the generator on the roof in this building, when the furnaces weren't working?
The furnace.
So
The
if
furnace
we-
was, that
if
money
we-
came from the towns?
No.
No. So, okay.
Shannon, can you explain the process for an emergency repair? Because a lot of it varies, but most of it comes
Yeah.
from operating. Go
It
ahead.
comes from operating.
Yeah, so if we already had like a capital approval for, I don't know, say interior updates, and it was broad. If it was a broad thing like that, and there was some interior
Broad.
updates that we needed to do, and we didn't spend the money, we could use that capital fund.
Okay.
But say we didn't have that, or it's been fully spent from a year prior, then we have to fund it out of our operating budget
Okay.
for an emergency of that sort.
And then aside from that, there's no capital fund anywhere. It's all out of operating, or it's all from the towns.
So no, the region has a capital budget. Yeah. In the capital budget, some things are very specific
Yeah.
and some are very broad. Dependent on if an emergency comes up, if it fits within the broad category, it can be charged on the capital budget.
Okay.
However, there also have been instances, because of the years of deferred maintenance, where that line is not, there's no funds there.
Okay.
So if it does not fit within the capital budget, it is
Okay.
on operating. If there is no more money in the capital budget line, it is on operating.
Okay. Understand.
There's also, just for a little bit more clarification, so when we have our capital budget, it gets approved by the town before we can buy it. So we're not, we can't buy a bus and then tell the town they have to pay for
Right.
it. They have to approve.
Right.
We can't buy things with money we don't have yet.
Thank you. Yeah. Darn.
Right? Okay, Tillman.
Thanks. So, thanks for explaining this. On slide 7, as you said, you can choose any arbitrary number of what you want to choose for increases. And while Amherst arguably is the big fish, I think there could be a different scenario where we ask Pelham what their maximum is. And if they say 4%, then, everybody else goes down proportionally, and it would be really bad for our, overall budget. But that would also get us back to the statutory method. And so I just want to be careful about assuming that Amherst is the only one that matters because it's the big number. For small towns, these percentages do matter, and I do think it's important that we respect the percentages and then look at the absolute numbers, because these small towns don't have much flexibility in their budget. And so if you want to really go back to the statutory, we should consider asking everyone and take the minimum that anybody can provide as the maximum increase that we can do on the overall budget. That would be devastating for the budget, but I think we have to be fair to all 4 towns. And since a colleague of mine mentioned the importance of athletics and proper budgeting, I hope that in a future revision of slide 16, athletics will also be listed here.
So I wanted to jump in, Tillman, and say that in our preparation of this, it wasn't in no disrespect to any of the towns. We know that we had received correspondence from Amherst already stating that they were doing 3%, and we are trying to push to the 4%. But I do also agree that, and that's what Shannon is presenting it. And this is the purpose of this meeting, for us to walk through the different suggestions to properly prep for the upcoming 4 towns, because we did promise the towns that we would send them something ahead of time. So that is something definitely we could look at and see what we could push to and what the impact may be.
Yep.
I just want to point out that during the last 4 towns meeting, Leverett, for example, said that increases that are in the order of what's discussed here are not possible, right? So while they may not have said it needs to be 4%, they have said that 13.24 is also not possible. So I think we need to respect that.
I agree. So I would say if we could go to our towns, and I'll certainly reach out and try to see what they can afford or where they could be, so that we could really bring that to the 4 towns meeting and figure out what assessment method we're using, so we can figure out what our deficit is going to be, because it's really difficult to plan when we don't know what number we're at. It makes it really hard.
Sarah.
I think we need to have, at least available, because I'm sure it'll be requested from Amherst, a scenario which assumes a 3% increase on Amherst's assessment, then assumes that dollar increase is due to applying the modified statutory method. So like fill in, if that addition, that 3% on top of this year represents 79.92 or whatever percent, then what are the other towns' assessments? And then see what kind of deficit that would create. Because they've told us, and I know it's in their guidelines, budget guidelines that they've adopted, that they're saying 3%. So I think we should show a scenario that this is what happens if we have 3%, Amherst's increase ends up being 3%, and that's all due to the modified statutory method. I ran the number just this evening, I'm not sure it's right, but what I came up with was that it would mean a deficit of about $1.25 million. So about $240,000 additional deficit. But I think the town, at least Amherst, is going to want to see that we've, yeah.
I want to jump in because I meet monthly with our regional reps at DESI. And I have to stress and say that we every year submit for approval for a fiscal year only on these different changes. What Shannon presented in terms of the modified statutory method is what is agreed upon in our regional agreement. Whatever the towns are up and down, and I know this started a couple of years ago, and we're all over the place. And I say that because we are all over the place. We still have to get approval from DESI. We have to send it to the commissioner after the towns vote. Like, we can't even have the towns vote on it until we get approval from DESI.
Are you talking about an assessment method?
An assessment method. If it's not the assessment method that is in our current regional agreement, we have to send it for legal and vetting, get a pre-approval, then the towns vote, then we send it to the commissioner who has to approve, then we move forward. For whatever we do this year, we need to be able to say, and this is just me, because I think that we have been bouncing the region back and forth on a ball with no plan how to get us back to our agreed upon modified method in our regional agreement. There was no plan. There was no plan. It was hopes and prayers. We have hoped, we've prayed, we are here now. We need to put a plan in place because really, honestly and truly, these are the lives of children. So I do agree that towns need to say what they can and can't afford, but they need to know that next year we're going back to what they agreed upon and it's in there, or we just need to go to it this year. But honestly and truly, we need to transition to what is in our agreement and stop making these changes every year. Shannon, you can answer the question. I just wanted to put that out there.
I'm not sure. Can you repeat the question now?
I think it was just to be able to show a 3% increase from
Oh,
Amherst.
yeah.
Right,
so,
yeah, my
I
que-
can
yeah,
certainly
suggest-
show that. Yeah, that's just a matter of putting in a different number and just having that available. It's just going to increase what the other towns.
No, because I'm saying adjust the deficit. Set Amherst's dollar increase equal to 3%, an additional 3% of what
okay,
they're paying this year. Call that their part due to the statutory method applied to, some number, and then figure out what the number is. And I'm saying I think it's 1.25 million. So we could show them.
I can do that in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Jennifer.
First, thank you, Shannon, for the presentation and all this work. I actually was able to follow your presentation, so thank you. But I feel like I'm farther away from it now than I was at the end of your presentation. But I think I had the opposite request from Sarah, which is I feel like I guess my bottom line is I think we should push Amherst. I don't think, I realize we got guidance from Amherst that said they would give us 3% over the 6% base, but I think that we should push them, and I think that we shouldn't allow Amherst to tell us what they're gonna give us without us giving them input on what we need. So I was gonna ask for something, I don't even know if this is possible or if you've already done it, but push Amherst for 4%. And then if we look at the hybrid model, if instead of setting Amherst at 3% in the hybrid model, what if we set Amherst at 4% in the hybrid model? Would that then reduce the assessment of the other three towns? Or is that what the modified statutory is? I'm not really sure, but I don't think our only proposal or our only idea should be, well, Amherst at 3%, so we're just gonna take 3%. I think we should work to push them, and I think the public would support us. So
What I would say with the hybrid model, with this is assuming a 4% overall budget increase, but it's just divided up differently. So I guess my question to you all is, are we only asking for a 4% overall budget increase? And if we're not only asking for that, then we need to figure out what we are asking for so that we can develop this hybrid model properly.
I mean, it sounds ridiculous to say that a $1 million deficit doesn't feel that bad compared to 1.4 million. I mean, it's still pretty bad, but so I don't know the answer. I mean, I just said we should push Amherst, and I do think we should, but I'm also thinking about what's likely to be approved. And when I look at your slide 14, it seems like the hybrid model is more likely to be approved, but that's a 1.4 million deficit, and that sets Amherst at 3%, which I don't think we should do. The modified statutory is more appealing, but I think less likely to get approved. So I don't know, other than I think we should push Amherst and try to minimize our deficit. I mean, that seems obvious to say. But sorry, I do have one specific question about slide 16, the positions impacted. You've got, and I know you said the central office staff serves more than one district, but that central office at 70,000 for 4 positions, does that 4 positions represent 4 FTEs? And how could that only be 70 grand?
So if they're split districts, depending on, so they could be 54% region, 42% Amherst, 4% Pelham. So it breaks down fractional wise. Here's the other thing. Part of this is also it's reduced and restructured.
Gotcha.
The key here.
Okay. So it's not necessarily for people.
Right. So it equates to 4, but dependent on how we restructured a specific division and move positions across, or remove the position, or change their percentages, it'll end up. It doesn't look like it does, but it will. Okay. And so, for example, there's some individuals who are 30% on the region, but 70% on Amherst. So you might see a reduction in a larger bump in the Amherst reduction. And so that's the difference with central office. But in central office, what we've been doing, and I've been working with the team to do, is restructure, probably absorb, like one position is gone, so take it and split that amongst 4, take the cost savings and move it across other positions, take a position out and move it so it's been the moving of pieces across the board, but they did do the math.
Okay, thank you.
Irv?
First, to my esteemed colleague, Tillman, I would invite you to go before your town and say that athletics is not a priority. I'd also invite you to stand before students at the high school and middle school and say the same thing. The athletics are not a priority. In terms of the school bus, I think that's the $80,000 a year for all 3 is a remarkable deal. I'm sort of like stunned. I was going through the math of this, but I know about leasing. I do know about leasing. So, but it's a remarkably great deal, and if that's a deal on the table, take it now, because it is an incredible deal at $80,000 for all 3 buses. Remarkable. I would also think that, Shannon, that it would be really a good idea if you and Dr. Z, especially you and Dr. Z, meet with the other the 4 towns, because you're meeting with them anyway, and go over these numbers, and see if any kind of consensus can be derived before a 4 towns meeting. And I guess the other thing is, are we talking about, the town has said 3%? Are we now saying we're going beyond that and making our budget assumptions based on a 4%? Is that correct? Or are we basing it on the 3%?
I think
it's up to, we don't really know. I don't really know.
So I think what we wanted to do was, we know that when we ended the 4 towns meeting, we said that we were going to send possible ways to get us back to our actual assessment method to them prior to the February 4 towns. We also were asked to present it to the school committee for discussion before we sent it out. So this conversation is, hey, this is what we're looking at. This is how it's really like, hey guys, this is what we're looking at. This is how we move numbers around in our little meetings, and this is what we do. And take from all of your suggestions and then go back and develop and then send it back out. So this is really what we're trying to do here. So we haven't said it. We looked at if they're at 4%, we're gonna go back and meet. Shannon's been meeting with different individuals from the finance committees from all of the towns. We've been in conversations with them, so it's not like we haven't been. We plan to continue to be, and so those suggestions are there. But that's what we're doing. We're really saying, how can we push different parts? What do we need to do? Knowing that we need to kind of look a little more organized when we submit things to DESI, and we're on our way to getting back to where we agreed upon in our established regional agreement.
I guess the outstanding question in my mind is, are all of these reductions in staff based on 3% or on 4%?
This reduction is based on the range, and that's why we're sitting right now in the middle, because we're looking at if we have to go up to, and that's why we said it's very hard for us to plan. If we have to go up to 1.4 with the 4%, we are only right now at approximately 1.3 million with 24 positions at the region. So everyone's like, well, what is this going to look like? If we have to hit the 1.4, we are looking at least 4 more positions. So we're looking at anywhere from 28 to 30 positions at the region that would need to be cut to hit that $1.4 million deficit. We know that if we hit the 1 million or find a way to get less than, then we're able to restore positions, and the positions that would be restored at the schools. They would not be schools and student-facing positions will be restored first. That is the priority right now. And so that's what I would say. We're sitting in the middle right now.
All right, so if I'm understanding you, the higher number of positions to be eliminated is based on a lower percentage that we would be expecting from the town, i.e. 3%?
Yes.
All right, and so 4% would mean a less number of positions that would need to be dealt with if we had 4%.
No, if 4% across, if everyone hit 4%, we would still be facing a large deficit of cuts. However, if it was 4% from Amherst and we had the statute modified statutory, then we would be facing the 1 million, which would allow us to restore positions.
All right, so it would be really good for all of us to understand what you just said there, is that because the lower number of people that are impacted needs to be understood, that what that means is that we are looking at a higher number from the town of Amherst. Is that correct?
The more money Amherst can give us, the less positions we have to cut, yes.
Right, and that number is 4%, is that correct?
We don't know yet, Irv. That's what we're all trying to work on and figure out.
Wait. We don't know what that number is, whether it's 4%, 5%, or 6%?
These are examples.
These are examples that we're working with. A place to start. We have to go.
Well, the town of Amherst is not going to say this is a place to start. They need something concrete to work with.
Point
and
of
we need
order.
something
Yep.
To bring them something concrete to work with.
Point of order.
Deb?
Thank you.
I'm done.
What's your point?
Okay.
My point is, that's more than one question and a follow-up.
Okay. Deb,
Thank
you are
you.
next.
So I have a question, I have some questions, one clarifying question, and it will help me really understand this. So the statutory versus the modified statutory, I was under the impression that we had to go to DESI every single year because we have a modified statutory method. But what I'm hearing is that we don't have to go to DESI and we don't need all towns' approval because our modified statutory is in our regional agreement. That's great. number one, because I've been at this a year, and I am really tired already of the bulk of the discussion at these four towns being who pays what part of the pie instead of how much can we afford. It's just seems like we're fighting over the check, not talking about what our schools need to be functional. And if we can get away from that, and I have no idea how in the world anybody thought that the guardrail method was ever going to get us closer to the statutory method. It's clearly not. I don't see how it ever could. So I am pretty gleeful about moving away from these discussions, the DESI part, and just making the conversation simple by sticking to the statutory method.
So in our regional agreement, it's called the modified statutory method, and that's what we presented. And so that's there. What we've been writing to DESI every year is that guardrail method.
Is the guardrail, okay.
Or with the 4%.
But that's me personally. I understand I'm one of 9. However, one of the towns pointed out that for the next 4 towns meeting, that an important part of their consideration is understanding the impact on the program. So I know it's impossible to predict this, but I think any kind of insight that you can provide to any of these bigger picture issues in terms of what it looks like at the programmatic level would facilitate that discussion.
So that was this slide. Unit A isn't just teachers, it's professional staff.
Yeah.
But we can add that in there.
Okay.
And say that we would end up having to cut 4 professional staff.
Okay.
Either teachers, counselor, guidance counselors, school adjustment counselors,
Okay.
deans. That's who's in Unit A. Unit B is clerical positions. That's our secretaries. Unit C are our paraeducators. So we can put that in the parentheses so that everyone can see and go through and see this is going to be the impact. The thing is that we would have to do is, and we're not there yet, is then we would have to say what type of teacher, what type of program are we shutting down, what type, and that comes in more at the building and truly programmatic level.
I understand that.
And so what we can do right now is say, this is who fits within this class. And then once we're able to better identify, but it's hard, and that's why Shannon keeps repeating, it's hard for us to plan because we are consistently up in the, and we're getting to the point where we need to be very firm.
And my last point is November 4th, 2024, Town of Amherst presented their financial indicators, gave us a sense of where we were going, but also in that spreadsheet was a surplus of $5,749,830. And they've had an average 4+ surplus for the past 8 years. So it's not a one-time thing. And I understand the general principle to not, they tell you over and over again, you can't use your operating from your reserves. But this is not a reserve until it disappears from free cash between November 1st and November 20, I guess it disappeared later this year. But there's this tiny little interval where the cash is certified, the surplus is made clear, and then boom, it's gone into, in our case, 80% of it goes to a capital stabilization fund, which is a special purpose capital fund, and it requires, anyway. However, the town of Pelham had a very modest surplus at the end of this fiscal year. We didn't have an indicators meeting, so I just want to share these numbers with you because my intention is to push our town. Pelham had a surplus of $311,000. Leverett had a surplus of $4,924,136, and Shutesbury had a surplus of $10,700,707. Now, I'm not saying I know how to operate a municipality, but I am saying that when you generate these kinds of surpluses, it is very hard year after year after year, and that's Amherst. It's very hard to understand why the schools get cut year after year after year. I mean, there's this percentage thing, which is, you know, there's what Tracy Novick told us about the municipal revenue growth factor, and none of our towns are at 3%. None of our towns are at 4%. The lowest is like 5%. I could go back and look at her presentation, but the growth, you know, they love to talk about this 2.5%, like that's the maximum they can raise. But the growth and I understand that the rolling average has to smooth out these growths. The growth in these towns is not 2.5%. And then one of Amherst's points is none of the other towns are at their maximum levy, so they can raise taxes more. So this idea that there is not enough money and we have to keep doing this year after year after year is just not supported by any of these numbers. So my plan is to push the town of Amherst, and I would welcome you folks to think about doing the same with yours. Thank you.
Bridget.
Well, here we are again with 24 to 30 positions on the table to be cut from the region. I'm elected by the voters of Amherst. All my constituents, nobody has come to me and said, please cut the schools year after year, $1.5 million. I'm not hearing that at all. I'm mentioning that right now because this is feeling like some backroom backwards planning, upside down. I know a good educator does backwards planning, but this is upside down backwards planning because we're talking about what the 4 towns are saying to us is needed, but we're elected as school committee members and we swore an oath to in the state of Mass even to ask for the funding that supports the education that we believe the students need. So with all love and appreciation for this slideshow, Shannon, amazing work. So this is nothing about Shannon. It's about sort of the framework for the discussion that we're having. I feel like what we need to do is make sure that one of these slides shows the cost of fully funding, because what will happen is this slide, the public isn't paying attention because the public budget hearing where they come and talk to us about what they want in the school happens in April. And if we've already made a deal in these back rooms of the 4-town meeting, I know they're public meetings, but a lot of people don't feel that way because they know to pay attention in April. Right? And then we will have not done our jobs as elected officials of being responsive in a democratic way to our constituencies. So I really want to be putting that forward of what it costs to fully fund and not what it costs. I heard last year very clearly that the middle school couldn't afford to lose one more person. That's not what this slide says, right? I'm sure that the high school is in central office. Some of these positions that are on the chopping block are ones that we literally created to respond to the crisis. So I'm not ignorant of the fact that there's fiscal realities, but I'm also very well apprised that there's a good amount of money that's going other places, and we have to, as towns, consider our priorities. That may be different in different towns, but I live in Amherst.
Before I speak, point of order, we have exceeded 2.5 hours.
All right. Jennifer.
I move to extend our meeting by 30 minutes.
I second.
Was that you, William?
That was me, yeah, sorry.
All right. Bridget.
No.
Jennifer.
Yes.
Anna.
Yes.
William.
Yes.
Deb,
Yes.
Sarah,
Yes.
Tillman,
Yes.
Irv,
No.
and Sarah Bess, yes. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 yeses, 2 nos. We will extend for 30 minutes. All right.
I'll
Now,
proceed.
go ahead.
I- We have two variables, which is the total budget and the assessment method. And if we go immediately to the modified statutory method, which I agree we should get to at some point, we're gonna have outrageous numbers. So the level services budget is on page 6, which is kind of what we would ideally want. And there we can see that for some towns, this is in the 17% for Leverett, Pelham, 26%. Even with a, strong commitment to education, this might not be feasible. Therefore, I'm going to propose a different assessment method that will, over time, get us to the modified statutory method. And that is that any town that is not at the statutory percentage pays 2% more than the max of any other town. So let's say Amherst comes up with 3%. And if you calculated it out, Leverett would be at 13 or something like that, or whatever. They just pay 5. And they do that for so long, over multiple years, until they're back to the statutory.
They will never get there.
Yes, they will.
They will never get there.
Because right now, the difference between, on slide 7, the difference between Pelham, if I may choose them, and the 4% of Amherst is 18% difference. So if you make up 2% every year extra, they'll get there in 9 years. This is the slowest of the other 3 towns. It will achieve that we get to the statutory method, and it will limit the imbalance between the towns in the budget. Because if you stay with the guardrail method, it will always be the same for everyone, and it will go
We'll
the
get
opposite.
further and further apart, absolutely.
Yes,
But
so,
the problem with,
Hold on.
Hold on. Anna.
yeah, end of comment.
Okay. William,
I was just gonna ask a question about the bus thing, because I'm a little confused. So we're leasing 3 buses back, and it looks like it says for all 4 buses, the maintenance. So are we buying 1 bus and we're leasing 3?
I think we have one bus.
We have an electric.
We sold it, didn't we?
No. No, we have, I
But
need to
this
confirm.
electric bus didn't work, and we had to get rid of it.
Yeah, and then we got another, I think we have one on the way, or we have 1 bus. I need to confirm that, but we do have 1.
Because it says here the electricity and maintenance for all 4 electric buses.
Right. Right, we do have 1. There was one that wasn't really kosher, we sent it back. We do have, I do believe we have 1 on the way. Either we have it on the way or it's already there.
Okay.
I think there's one on the way. That we don't have yet. That's been trouble getting. That we were supposed to. We have capital funds that we were purchasing it already,
So
and then
for-
there's 3 additional.
One follow-up. For $80,000 a year, then we're going to get maintenance and electricity costs for 4 buses?
No, 3.
It says
3.
maintenance for 4
Which
and
slide?
electricity for all 4. Under the third
the
bullet.
3rd bullet, paying for the electricity and maintenance for all 4 electric buses.
Okay, so I think, bear with me.
Okay.
The ports that the buses would plug into, they too will be maintained. So I believe the 4 will be maintained, but then the overall vehicular maintenance will be the 3.
Okay.
Sarah,
That's what happened was you try to cram
sorry.
like 30 pages into one slide. Sorry.
So back to the budget. I just want to note, I think there's confusion around 4% because 4% appears in 2 very different ways. One, in one scenario or a couple, it's the increase in the total budget. In another, or various other scenarios, it's the increase in 1 or more towns. So I think anytime somebody's saying 4%, they need to make clear. Are they talking about 4% increase in the entire budget or just somebody's assessment? Now, two things about the hybrid method. It sounded like Dr. Z doesn't like it because it involves going to DESI again. So I wonder about that. But secondly, I don't see how it gets us closer to the modified statutory method. I mean, so I just don't see it, and I don't understand, like, would we do it again next year? Like, how is that a step on a path to getting back to the modified statutory?
So,
Because the-
can I answer the first? Let me answer. You want to take it on and then?
You could go first. That's okay.
So, no, I don't like it. I don't like it because I have to go to DESI with something anyway. But I don't like it because I feel like it's a comfort and not it's a comfort for the towns. And I go back to my resolution, which is, what do we need to best educate children? Children are my focus. So for me, if we just do the method that we have within our already established regional agreement, that would be great because it's already there. It will get us to where we need to be because guess what? It's where we agreed upon being. I do think that what we will commit to doing is we will run the scenario that Tillman sent. We'll run another scenario. We will be prepared for the January 27th regional meeting. We can send you guys some new walkthroughs to look at. And then after that, we can send it forward to the 4 towns. The reason why we're trying to get some of this done was because we knew that if there was a change to what needed to go to DESI, we needed to have that approved before the 4 towns were able to vote on it. So we'll run some scenarios, and for us, we'll also run it with the scale to show FY26, FY27, FY28, we're at where we agreed we would be.
Shannon, can you explain how the hybrid gets us closer to the modified statutory method?
Yep. So the hybrid model, if we're just looking at, it's a 4% increase to the budget overall. So we know what that amount would be. It's 24 million. And we take the percentages from the statutory method from we take the percentages, the 79.92%, the 5.3%, the 7.54, the 7.24. Those were the percentages of how the pie was divided up using the statutory method. And the only adjustment, the adjustment that I made on the hybrid was, since Amherst, that would make Amherst only at 2.32% of the increase. Of an increase when we know we're going to at least get 3%. I gave the remaining amount to the other towns, but they're paying the percentage based on the statutory percentage. So it's not just a flat 4% that we've been doing to all towns. So it is going back, getting us towards the statutory method, and the towns are paying a portion of their pie based on that. Does that make sense?
Maybe. That's on me. But then what do you, in a perfect world, then what happens the following year? We just go to the modified statutory method, or you're not thinking that far ahead?
Well, no, I have thought about it, and it's going to depend on, one, where our operating budget falls to see, and look at the statutory method and see, are the percentages still outrageous? Are they still super high? What is if we reduce it by whatever it needs to be reduced by, where does it land? And do we need to do the hybrid model at that point, or are we more aligned with revenues next year? It's hard to know. Okay. But we'll know that the percentages that each of the towns paid were related to the statutory method, so it'll help reduce the percentages owed by each town over time. It's not gonna solve it in 1 year, though.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Jennifer.
I withdraw.
Okie dokie. Tillman.
Dr. Z, what you said, if I paraphrase you correctly, if we were to use the modified statutory method, which is something that we had all agreed upon, the budget would be good for what we need for our students. Is that?
It'll be closer. It will still
Right.
have the
Oh.
1 million.
Yes, but the cap for the total budget is arbitrary in that scenario. And in this particular case, we chose 4% for Amherst, but there is no reason why you chose Amherst to have their 4% cap. We could ask Pelham if they want a 4% cap. And if that was the case, Amherst would pay 0.5% extra or something like that. And the overall budget would be terrible for our schools. So I just want to be careful with saying that the only thing that we need to do is go to the modified statutory method, because in that case, if any town can set whatever cap they want, we may end up with an extremely low budget overall, and that's not what we want.
Thank you for
I
that.
think part of it is though we need, like, we wouldn't have putting Pelham. Just say Pelham said they could only do 2% or whatever, and we use the statutory method. Like, that would be outrageous for the district. But I had to present something that could potentially be something we use to work from to get the budget approved, and so that's why I had put that.
This was
Did-
not
did-
meant
No,
to be a criticism.
no,
of
it wasn't. It was clarity and the language that I use, and I appreciate it. And thank you for that, Tillman.
Anna.
So I'm with Bridget. I think that we have to find a way to not cut 24 to 28 positions. And so I'm wondering if one thing that we did was, you take a 4% overall budget increase, which I think is still a bit, clearly we need more like 6. But if we could get a little bit more than 4 by doing the little machinations that Shannon suggested, but then at the end of the day, instead of allowing Amherst to sit, I'm sorry, did you have them at 3 at the end? 4. If you pushed them all the way up to 4, and didn't redistribute the amount between 3 and 4 among the other towns, because what we don't want to do is bring us all back down to 4 again. But if you redistribute 1% among the other towns, and then you just add 1% to Amherst so that they are paying 4%, and then Shutesbury is still at like 3 something percent, and you could move Shutesbury up to 4, and then still have Pelham and Leverett considerably higher than that. I think it's like 13 and something. But if they could actually fund that amount of an increase, where would that land us? I think that would land us a little bit, I don't think we would get all the way to the 1.016, but we would get we'd definitely be able to add in several positions if Amherst would end up at 4 and not redistribute the money, but just add the money back in. And I think, asking for that amount of money, I think showing Amherst that the other towns are having a good faith effort to start catching up. I don't think anybody expects or requires the other towns to make it all up in 1 year. I think that that's clear to everybody involved. But to have a good faith effort from the 2 towns that are very far behind, and still ask the other towns to have at least a 4% increase over last year is not unreasonable, to make sure that the region is funded as well as it possibly can be funded without overly stressing towns out in 1 year. I think Tillman had a good point, like maybe not too much, and maybe the 13% or whatever is too much to ask. But I do think that both Pelham and Leverett need to dig deep a little bit and really stretch what they think is possible, because otherwise it really is going to be a very long time. And the problem in the future is that those percentages keep shifting. And the way it's looking right now is Amherst is going down and Pelham and Leverett are continuing to increase their percentage that they owe of the total pot. And so, 2% may seem like a lot now, but I think it needs to be higher than that to ever really make substantial progress on getting back to the statutory method. And, I think we definitely made a mistake many years ago when we said, let's implement the guardrails. I think we should have tried to figure something else out that wasn't quite as offsetting, getting further and further away of the formula, but that, bygones. So now we have to move forward.
Thank you. So I have Deb on the list, and then I think we should come back to this conversation and have it a different time that's not tonight, because we have 10 minutes to get through the rest of our meeting. Deb.
I can be brief. Circling back to the state initiatives that are possibly going to give us a lot of budget relief for FY26, I am eager to kick the can down the road a little bit so we don't wind up losing educators that we might have the funds to restore next year. I just think, I know we said this last year, we need more time, but there's been progress. It's not like we're in the same place we were last year. There's, if the districts get the money that is being assessed for the charter schools, that's $2 million for this district. If Chapter 70 reform takes place, that's also, there's 211 districts in, I said I would be brief. Okay, I'm done. There's just money coming. I feel it. Don't lose hope.
All right. So next, we'll come back to this. I feel like we have more. We'll just keep coming back. Thank you again, Shannon, for all this work. This is very impressive. All right. So next up was the FSS draft, which we are going to postpone till our next meeting. Okay. So next up is annual. There are 3 drafts attached. The draft of an annual agenda, operating protocols, and a memo template. So this started from when I went to the MASC conference and was trying to learn about how to be a better chair and how to help your committee move along in an organized method. And so these 2 things were presented, and I thought could be very helpful for us. So first, the annual agenda. Can we put it up? Oh no. So I went. Why is it doing weird things? So I went through our past practices and all of our policies. If there were, when things had to happen, and try to organize it so our committee can try and stay more organized, and we all know what's coming up, which is helpful for us and the public and the superintendent and her team. So it's all obviously very movable. We just needed a place to start from. So that is where it starts for this one. And like I said, this is just a place to start from, so open to any and all feedback. And then the next thing was operating protocols, which I looked at several drafts that other committees have, and this is what they use to keep them focused on their work and their roles, and sets expectation. And so I did the same thing with this, and I went through all of our policies and pulled out the things that I felt like needed to be highlighted. And again, like I said, drafts open to plenty of feedback. So I don't know that in the last 10 minutes of our meeting we can go through all of these things, but I wanted to start the conversation, and yeah, that's where I landed. So, thoughts, comments, Jennifer?
So we have 10 minutes till our 30 minutes is up. I
Yep.
think obviously we should put this on a future agenda to discuss in detail. I have some specific things and comments about the document. First of all, thank you for doing this. I think it's a great start. I would ask that the role of the chair be part of this document, because it's unclear to me when the chair can make decisions without consulting the committee, and I would like that to be more clear.
Sorry, question, the protocol? Are you talking about putting
Yeah,
it in the
protocols
protocol?
document.
Okay,
In addition, the agenda section seems that it's mostly the chair's responsibility and not the committee's, this agenda section in this document. So just that's another thing. And then lastly, just high level, is this a pledge that we're gonna sign? Because it says, we hereby commit to the following, or is this just like a document that we agree to, that we, I don't know, so that's just another question, because it's like if we're all gonna sign on to this, but again, there are things on here that are specifically only the chair's responsibility, as far as I know. And so, I just wanted to suggest that we stop 5 minutes before our 30-minute end time, so that we can approve the gifts. Oh, thank you.
Yep. Anything else? Deb?
I think this is great. Thank you for doing all this work. I think this will help in terms of transparency with the public, so that we could put this somewhere they can see it and they can know what to expect. Thank you. The agenda in particular, but also the mission statement and protocols.
All right. Anything else before we move on to our, so if you have things, Jennifer, feel free to email them, and
Thank you.
Same for anybody else. Okay. Did you
We
have?
wanted to talk about the note taker in this context.
Oh, yes. Yep. I don't want to take all the notes also.
I will take the notes on February 10th.
Awesome.
Oh, no, wait a minute. The February meeting, the 17th.
You're going to take the notes on the 17th.
Yes.
Okay.
There's only one, yeah.
feel free to appoint.
February vacation.
Okay, so can we pick someone to take the notes for our next meeting? And then we can bring this back and try and organize it in a more organized manner for our future meetings in our next 2 minutes.
I'm not volunteering. I
No,
have a
that's fine.
comment. We really need to hire someone to do this. It's not, you shouldn't be taking minutes and chairing the meeting. None of us should be taking the minutes while we're participating in the meeting. And none of us have time to watch the recording and take minutes afterwards. I strongly think this needs to be someone's paid job, as we've done in the past. I don't see how else to do it.
Okay.
I would second that.
Okay.
I will volunteer to read the gifts.
Hold on, I do have agenda plan and comment. I
Yep.
don't know what order you wanted to.
Yep, so agenda and then gifts.
We have the responsibility now to determine what the graduation requirements are. So I would like to know what is I don't need to know now, but I would like to hear pretty soon, what is the plan for developing that? And, obviously the students and families will want to know ASAP what they're going to have to do to get a diploma this year.
Sure
So-
thing. Thank you to William, the joint policy subcommittee chair, who actually reached out to the district office. Tanya, in her OT, her director role, had already had preliminary meetings. I've attended meetings with superintendents as well as DESI, William has already planned a meeting. I think we're meeting this week or next week. I'm not good with the calendar, but I know that we are meeting. So because the conversation is, we're gonna present some of the things where we are at to him, and then we're gonna bring it in front of the committee. And so he has already reached out so that we can have that up and come. But we've been doing the research to determine what is actually required, because even though the CD and the graduation requirements are two different things, we still have to identify what is our competency determination to make sure that our students are there, and then we still have to determine our graduation requirements. And also, we are looking at our promotional policy within the region, procedural guideline within the region to align with our academic achievement policy that the committee has. So all of those conversations will present so that we can bring it forward to the subcommittee and it can come to the larger committee.
And the subcommittee's already started those conversations.
Yes.
Any other future agenda planning? Okay. If you think of something, feel free to email me. Next is accept gifts. Jennifer.
I move that we accept the following gifts from anonymous multiple donors to support Walmart/Target, Marshall's Visa gift cards for Family Center Holiday Drive for $350, Grin and Barrett number 13586 to support middle school picture commissions at Principal Discretionary Fund, $793.84, Murray Eisenberg number 9503 in memory of Phyllis Eisenberg for student achievement or promotion of environmental science or chemistry, $500, and ARPS PGO number 133 Summit Academy Community Hygiene Closet, $400, for a cash total of $1,693.84, gift card total of $350, for a grand total of $2,043.84.
Go ahead, Sarah.
Second.
Okay. Thank you. This is very generous gifts. Bridget. You have to vote.
Yes.
Jennifer.
Yes.
Anna.
Yes.
William.
Yes.
Deb.
Yes.
Sarah.
Yes.
Tillman.
Yes.
Irv.
Yes.
And Sarah Beth, yes. So, all right. Thank you all so very much. This is so generous. Okay. Next up.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Was that you, Deb?
Yep.
Bridget.
Yes.
Jennifer.
Yes.
Anna.
Yes.
William.
Yes.
Deb.
Yes.
Sarah.
Yes.
Tillman.
Yes.
Irv.
Yes.
Sarah Beth, we are adjourned. Thank you all.